Okay, good morning and welcome to this QA Tech Week. My name's Mark Cresswell and I'm here today to talk to you about user state virtualization using UEV version 2.0, which is a component of the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, which is available to users who have a volume license agreement with software assurance on that volume license agreement. Before we get started, there's a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces I need to tell you about. First of all, the session will be recorded and made available to you at a later date. Those of you that are attending this session, you will receive an email link to this particular recording within the next week or so. During the presentation, if you have any questions or issues, then please use the chat window. Sam Tobin will be monitoring the chat window, and I'll be pausing for questions at the end of each demonstration or at the end of the presentation. Should you have any queries after the event, then please email us at techweek@qa.com. But because we are having a number of presentations this week, I ask you to include my name, Mark Cresswell, and the session name, UEV, in the subject title. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with the current session then. So the objective of this particular session is to learn how to use User Experience Virtualization to enable users to roam between different types of devices and keeping the user experience the same. We'll be looking at how to deploy and configure UEV and some of the management options that we have available to us. UEV is very similar, I suppose, to roaming profiles in the fact that we can have user state following us around, but it's more encompassing than roaming profiles because it allows us to offer a more granular control over the amount of data that goes between a management server or a repository server for user state and the actual client itself. So we can be very specific about which registry keys and files we want to follow us around. Unlike roaming profiles where we get all or nothing. One of the things you will learn here is that there is no management infrastructure or tools required to manage UEV centrally. In fact, it fits quite neatly with our existing management infrastructure in that the client itself, okay, is configured through XML files. These are template files that basically describe the setting locations and the files that include part of the settings, because some applications store their configuration in files rather than in the registry. So those templates we can push out centrally and update them centrally, and we have a central settings store. So once the client has been configured, and the majority of the settings of the client can be configured quite easily through a group policy, and we'll see where we can get the group policy template for later on. We can use our existing deployment technologies such as System Center Configuration Manager to maybe push out the client and pre-configure its setup. So let's have a look at some of the benefits of using UEV. Well, first of all, Microsoft have designed UEV to be both personal and flexible. One of the primary goals for UEV was to make sure the synchronizations are smarter and do not impede the speed of our logons while waiting around for large volumes of data to synchronize down to the clients. There's no specific OS reconfiguration required for this, and we also allow users a degree of personalization about which settings they want to roam between different versions of our Windows operating system, whether it being deployed natively to a desktop or through a session host server using RDS or through a VDI server using virtual desktop infrastructure where we connect through to a full Windows desktop operating system. It's also very simple. As I mentioned a moment ago, templates are used to identify the setting locations and file locations that we need to monitor. These templates can be stored centrally, although a number of templates do come out of the box, which include a lot of the Office applications as well as some of the built-in applications that we get with Windows. We can build our own custom templates as well. We are provided with a tool that will enable us to create our own custom templates, which will then allow us to define which settings should roam with our line of business applications. Settings that we monitor and file locations that we monitor are stored in setting location templates. These setting location templates can be stored centrally and updated usually on once a day by a scheduled task that runs on our client computers. The scheduled task will simply go and download into a local cache any templates that we have put up from the day before. This scheduled task can be run at any time, so if we do push out new templates, it is possible to instruct the users on how to run that task to pull down the latest templates. One of the other features of UEV as well is that when it initially installs, the applications that we monitor and the operating system settings that we monitor are initially snapshotted into an initial state, and we do have the ability at any time through a simple PowerShell command to roll back an individual application or an operating system setting back to its original state, as it was on that specific computer when we first installed or first started using UEV. As I already mentioned in the previous slide, UEV has no management infrastructure or no dedicated management infrastructure that we need to install. It's simply a client process that is configured through the setting location templates and a setting storage location where the PKGX files, which contain the user settings, are stored. The only thing we have to make sure is that those two locations are highly available to our clients, or if our clients are roaming, that we use a sync provider to synchronize those settings down into a local cache on our clients. Microsoft have, however, produced a desired configuration module pack for Configuration Manager 2012 for UEV. Now the idea here is that we can make sure that the configuration of UEV on our client does not deviate from our desired configuration. And we'll see a little bit more about that later in a later slide. We also find that UEV has this seamless integration into other Microsoft desktop virtualization products. I already mentioned earlier that UEV is more than capable of synchronizing settings between a Windows desktop installation, AppV 4.6 and AppV 5.0 installations. One of the problems we have though with UEV is that if an application is delivered using more than one technology down to a client, then unfortunately if we launch that same application using those different technologies, UEV does not recognize that settings have changed. It only really recognizes settings that have changed between different computers or different workstations. I say unfortunately because one of the advantages of using UEV could be to aid in migration between AppV 4.6 and AppV 5.0, where although we can migrate packages using the appropriate tools, it's more difficult to migrate user settings from the 4.6 environment to 5.0, where the applications have already been deployed and used. It is, however, possible to use UEV to do this, but we'd have to transition through a second computer. So in an AppV environment where I'm migrating between 4.6 and 5.0, we would have to transition through maybe a VDI machine in order to get our settings saved first before we deploy the app back down again as a 5.0 app. So let's see how UEV compares to the other state solutions from Microsoft. These include roaming profiles, the Microsoft account, and UEV. And along the top we have the different columns that represent the different flavors of roaming profile, Microsoft account, and UEV. And you'll notice that UEV has a tick in all of the columns, okay, apart from support for a primary machine attribute and support for non-domain joined machines. So with UEV we have to be domain joined. The primary machine account was introduced in Server 2012 and our Windows 8 profile supports this. The idea here is to identify our primary and secondary machines that we tend to log in at. One of the advantages of UEV though that the other state solutions do not provide is the ability to roam settings between VDI, RDS and AppV type environments. Okay, so when do you use UEV version 2.0? Well, UEV version 2.0 is usually chosen when we want a more granular control over the OS and application settings that we want to follow us around, thus reducing the amount of traffic that gets synchronized across the network down to our client at logon. We use it when we have a mixed environment, where we have a mixture of both physical and virtual desktops, or applications delivered through both physical and virtual means as well. And in a mixed application environment where we are hot desking between a physical installation and a virtual installation, again, as I mentioned before, we support both at v4.6 and 5.0 with UEV. Okay, so let's have a look what goes on under the hood of UEV version 2.0. At the center of this is the UEV agent. It is the responsibility of the UEV agent to monitor the settings and file locations as defined by the setting location templates. Now, these setting location templates are installed by default when UEV agent is installed on the client. There are a number of templates that cover the majority of the Office applications for versions going back as far as 2007, and Microsoft have recently released on their download site the templates for Office 2013. The setting location templates can also be stored on a file server as a share. We can upload the default setting location templates to this file server and then disable the local versions. This gives us the ability to be able to modify those templates to better suit the needs of our environment. The other shared folder that we need to understand is the settings storage location. This can be the user's home directory, and by default the UEV agent will always check to see whether there is a home directory, and if so, we'll start using that by default unless we configure it otherwise. There is also a local cached version of the settings storage location, and when the client has been used and the applications have been run, we initially store the settings that we are monitoring in the local cache. These are then replicated up to the settings storage location and then replicated down again to another client by a sync provider. In previous versions we used to use offline file support for doing this, but following feedback from clients, Microsoft decided to implement a dedicated service for this particular function. So offline folder support is no longer required for UEV version 2.0. Okay, the first trigger happens when the user logs on, and the operating system settings are then copied down from the settings store location. The next trigger happens when a user launches an application that is being monitored by the setting location templates. The UEV agent will then retrieve the pkgx file for that particular application from the settings store location and update the settings for the applications accordingly. Once the user is finished with the application and the application shuts down, we gather the settings and sync those back up to the settings store location. That way, when a user logs on another workstation, the settings will be available from the settings store location. Now, the settings store location itself needs to be highly available. There is a very aggressive timeout if the settings store location cannot be accessed by the client, as we do not want to delay logon or slow down the launch of application if the settings are not available at that instant in time. So we're talking here about laptop users who tend to roam around and very occasionally come into the office. They will therefore get their settings from the local cache copy. It's advantageous that the settings store location be made highly available, and to that end, if we are roaming between branch offices and head offices, etc., then we should have some kind of replication technology that replicates the storage setting location around our organization. Now, if you're using home directories already, then you probably have hit that challenge head on and use some kind of replication technology to make that home directory available where the user logs on, so they have a local copy. If not, then we can use technologies such as Microsoft Distributed File System Replication, DFSR, or we could use the SAN providers replication technology that comes with most storage area network solutions. Okay, so let's now move on and have a quick look at a demonstration of installing the User Experience Virtualization product. We'll have a look at the prerequisites for installing the agent, and I'll go through the installation process with you, and then we'll do some simple checks to make sure that replication is working, and I'll show you how we configure the various options needed in order to get this to actually work.
Okay, so I'm going to drop now into my virtual machines, and the first one I'm going to drop into is the Client 1 virtual machine. This client currently hasn't got UEV installed, so just log this on as Adam, who's a local administrator. I'll just put this into full screen as well. And the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to be doing a bit of work with some PowerShell, is I'm just going to put the PowerShell on the taskbar at the bottom there. So just pin to taskbar. Okay, so if I go to my domain controller and go to the lab files folder on here, we have a UE-V folder where my installers for 2.0 are actually installed. I'm running the x86 version of the operating system here. So in the x86 folder, you'll see there are two MSIs. There's the agent setup 86.msi and the tool setup x86.msi. Now I'm going to install the agent setup. This does take a few moments to install. It's in MSI format, so it can be pushed out using any of our traditional MSI delivery tools. So that could be group policies or System Center Configuration Manager. I'm also going to install the tool setup as well. Now, the tool setup is a program that allows me to create my own settings location templates. And what this tool will do, it will monitor an application and see what registry keys and files that application actually uses, and then create the template accordingly. So let's just install the agent for a moment. Once the agent is installed, then we will need to restart the computer. Now, the agent does require a .NET Framework version 4.0 or later to be installed. That's the full package, not the client profile package. And you're also going to need PowerShell version 3.0 or later installed as well. The client is basically PowerShell driven, and we'll have a look at some of the PowerShell commands that are available to us once we've finished the installation and installed and restarted the computer. Okay. Okay, so with the installation now complete, I now need to quickly restart the computer. Now fortunately, because I'm running SSDs on this laptop, the restart is very, very quick. So I'll just log myself back in again. Now, before we launch any programs, I thought I'd have a quick nose around the file system and show you where UEV actually stores things. Now the agent's installed, you'll notice there's a pop-up come from the sys tray there, which basically tells us that the administrator has now enabled a new feature that enables us to synchronize our Windows and application settings. And it also brings up the Company Settings Center, which is a tool that the end user can use to control the settings that they want to run with them. You'll notice we've got desktop settings grouped together, ease of access settings and themes. And if I drop down the application list here, you'll see there's a number of applications. Now, these are those applications for which we have the default setting location templates installed. You'll notice that Office 2010 and 2007 feature prominently in the list, along with Internet Explorer and a few of the other inbuilt applications such as Calculator. Now I'm going to be using Calculator in my demonstration to demonstrate the synchronization process. These settings can also be enabled or disabled by removing the tick out of the boxes, and we can also configure all of these through group policies as well, so we can take the decision out of the hands of the user by setting enforcement through group policy. There's also the option to sync now. This will force a synchronization to take place. Now, if the user is using the default sync provider, then synchronization takes place every 30 minutes. This is controlled through a scheduled job, which we'll take a look at in a few moments. Before we do that though, I just want to quickly nose around the file system, and the first place I want to look is the program data folder, Microsoft UEV. Now this particular location represents the all users profile, and you can see here we have a subfolder called templates, and this is where those setting location templates are being stored for us. And you can see there's WordPad and calculator, as well as some of the Office applications being listed here as well. Now these templates can be copied up to a system share, and that system share can also contain any custom templates that we create. And again, there's another scheduled job that runs via Task Scheduler at 3:30 every morning, or when the user logs on immediately after that time. We will go and check this location and see if there's any new or updated templates that we need to download. We can also disable the local templates, and if I've already copied those templates up to the template share, then this gives us the opportunity then to modify those templates to best suit the needs of our organization. The next folder location I want to look at is the users folder, and going to the Adam App Data Local Microsoft UEV folder. Here you'll see two folders. There is a Client 1 folder and a local sync folder. Let's look in the Client 1 folder first of all. This folder will contain subfolders that represent the Windows desktop settings and the applications that we have launched on this computer that are being monitored by the setting location templates. And in here you'll see there's a current value or a current folder and an initial folder. And in the initial folder we've got a pkgx file. Now this is the initial settings that are recorded as we install the UEV agent. This gives us the opportunity to reset our settings back to the defaults before UEV took control of them and started roaming them for us. We can reset those settings very simply by issuing a PowerShell command. Okay, now what I want to look at next is the Task Scheduler. So if I bring up Task Scheduler, you'll notice that UEV has installed a number of tasks to run at scheduled times. There's the Collect Client Experience Improvement Program data, but the interesting ones here are, first of all, the template auto update. There are multiple triggers defined for this, so if I look at the triggers that are defined, we can see that whenever a user starts the computer, or at 3:30 every morning, we will go and perform the action, and the action is to run the apply settings template catalog.exe command. Okay, so this is the command that actually synchronizes the templates from our file share. The other one is the sync controller application. This is the task that controls the synchronization of settings from our setting location on our server and the local cache, and you can see it triggers at user logon and it's repeated every 30 minutes. Okay, so now my application is installed. Then let's have a quick look at the configuration. I'm just going to run PowerShell, okay, because PowerShell allows me to set the configuration of the UEV client. Now, if you want to know what PowerShell commands are available to you for UEV, then you can simply use the get command PowerShell command with the module attribute and specify UEV. And this lists all the UEV PowerShell commands that are available to us. We'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail when we get back into the slide deck. Now, one useful one though is the get UEV configuration. So we're going to use that command to get the current configuration, and we can see that the UEV agent has been configured with a number of parameters out of the box. Now, one of the settings that is quite important is the settings storage path. Now, I have a number of issues with UEV in that out of the box it very rarely works. And that's because we have to do some post-installation configuration. And the first one I want to talk about is this settings storage path. By default, if this is not configured, the agent will look for the user's home directory, and it will use that as the settings storage location. In this particular environment, and in a lot of environments, the user's home directory is not used. So we have no settings storage path location in order to synchronize my settings up to. So the first thing I need to do then is to configure a settings storage location. It just so happens that if I go to my domain controller, we can see we have a UEV settings store, and if I go into that location, there's currently nothing in there. It's an empty folder. So that's the location I'm going to use for my setting storage path. Okay, now in order to set that, we use the set command, set UEV client configuration, and the setting I want to set is the setting storage path, and we'll put in DC1 / UEV settings store. Now I'm also going to append to that the %user name % variable, and by using this variable, then when the user initially creates a setting file in the settings storage path, it will be created in a subfile based on the current logged on user's name. So with that setting now set, you can see if I do another get configuration that the settings storage path has now been set. Now the second problem I have with UEV is that the sync method is set currently to the sync provider. In UEV version 1, this used to be the offline file support. Now, because people were reluctant to install offline file support just to get UEV to work, Microsoft have now included its own sync provider, which will synchronize the settings from the client up to the server and back down again. The problem I have with this is that this is run as a scheduled task. Now this might be ideal for a laptop user who occasionally comes into the office and will therefore sync their settings when they log on, etc. But when I'm doing a real live demonstration, the 30-minute time interval between synchronization isn't really very good. Plus the fact there's another bit of a gotcha here as well, and if I go back into the task scheduler, okay, and look at the UEV task, specifically the one that controls synchronization, you'll notice that the trigger, okay, says at logon of any user, after triggered, repeat every 30 minutes. But that's not strictly true, okay, because if I go into this and look at it in more detail with the editor, we can see that there is also a delay of the task for 30 minutes. So the initial delay then happens when the user logs on. It doesn't synchronize straight away, it waits 30 minutes. And this really is not very useful when trying to synchronize settings down to the user when the user comes in first thing in the morning, or synchronize settings back up to the storage location. I guess it probably would work in a real live laptop environment where users are moving around so long as they've logged in for at least 30 minutes. But I think in practice we would probably want to remove that particular delay. Now, if our workstations are not laptops but they are physically connected to a network, then we can bypass this synchronization process by turning off the sync method and setting it to none. In doing so, then we will look for the settings on the file share and not use the local cache. Okay, so before I do that though, I just want to show you that if I fire up my calculator, so I'm just going to go into accessories and quickly fire up calculator and close that down again. Now if I go into the user's profile, go into Atom and go into App Data, Local Microsoft UEV folder, we will see now under local sync folders there is a settings packages folder, and in here we have the Microsoft Calculator version 6. And in here we can see we have a file with a pkgx extension. Now this file contains all of the registry settings and any configuration file that we want to move with this application between different client workstations or different user environments if they're using RDS, for example, or AppV. We can look inside this file. There is a PowerShell command that allows me to export the settings on this file, and that is the export -uev package. So if I pass that through to my C:\users /Adam /appdata local Microsoft UEV, and we'll go into the settings packages, and in there we find Calculator 6, and in there we have the Microsoft Calculator 6 pkgx file. And you'll see that what we've done is we've exported the content of that file, and there's simply just a single registry setting in there, which is basically the placement, so where Calculator actually comes up in our window, and the action is to create that particular registry key with this particular value in it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the sync method. So I'm going to set the UEV configuration, and we're going to do sync method, and we're going to set it to a value of none. So if I now do another get configuration, we can see now that the sync method has been set to a value of none. Okay, so that now should mean that if I go to my Microsoft Calculator, we now have and go to the settings location on the server, we now have an Adam folder and a settings package location folder and Calculator 6 under there as well, and there's the pkg file that we created when we initially saved the application. So again, I could do the same thing. I could export that configuration from there, and that could be quite a useful debug tool in that I could compare the settings in the settings package location and the local cache for that as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up Calculator, and I'm going to make some changes to the configuration. We'll make it a scientific view, and while I'm at it, I will put a worksheet on, so we'll have the mortgage worksheet on as well. So now if I save that, and if I refresh this here, we can now see that the date and time stamp is now updated on that file. And now if I go back into my export command, okay, but this time I'm going to path it through to the share on the server, and we'll see what new settings have taken place in that file. PC1 / wrong folder. Settings store, Adam, packages, Calculator, pkgx. Now if I press return on that, you'll notice that a few more registry keys have now been captured, and these include the, let me move this over, put this into full screen, and that includes now the date, time, templates, unit conversion, and we've still got the Windows placement there. So again, you can see we are creating some registry keys if they don't already exist in the local client when this actually runs. Okay, I'm just going to minimize that back down again now, and I'm going to ensure that Calculator is not running, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my second client, okay, which is client 2, and I'm just going to log client 2 on, and we'll put that one into full screen. So with client 2 now logged on, I've logged that on as Adam as well, and I'm just going to run PowerShell from here, and I'm going to just check the configuration and make sure it's the same as on client 1. So if I do a get -uev configuration, and we can see that this one is still got its default configuration, so I'm going to set the storage path up, and I'm going to turn the sync provider or the sync method to none and disable the sync provider. So set -uev client configuration minus settings storage path //dc1 %% user name %, and I'm going to do the same for the sync method. To be none. Okay, with that now set, then all that's left for me to do is to launch Calculator, and with a bit of luck, my launch Calculator, we should see that the settings should come up with scientific with the mortgage worksheet. So I can change this now to the vehicle lease worksheet, okay, and I'll change the view to be statistical view, and if I shut that down now, and now if I switch back to my client 1, my client 1 machine, let's just minimize this one down and switch back to client 1 and bring up Calculator again. You'll see that now that has switched the view back to the statistical view with the vehicle lease worksheet. So my settings are now being preserved and are roaming with me between my two clients. Okay, so I'm going to move back into the slideshow now. So I'll just go and close this window down, or minimize this window, and bring back the UEV slideshow back up. Okay, so what we're going to look at next then is the deployment options that we need to understand before deploying UEV. There are four main areas that we need to consider here. These are configuring a setting storage location. Remember, that needs to be highly available. We're going to look at configuring the workstation with the UEV agent. We're going to look at how we create setting location templates, and then we're going to look at how we deploy and manage setting location templates centrally by using a file share. So the first one we're going to look at then is the setting storage location. Remember, UEV does not include any server components, so there's nothing to be installed on a server. The only thing that we require of our network, however, is a location where we can store our settings. Now, the PKGX files themselves will vary in size, but on average they're around about 3 to 5 megabytes per user. Now, obviously, if we are going to be including some application files that we want to roam with us as well, so maybe some application templates, etc., these may bulk out the actual PKGX file slightly. As I mentioned before, there are two options for our setting storage location. The first is the home directory as defined by Active Directory against the user object. So if our network administrators have set up a home folder for our users, then our UEV agent will automatically use that home folder as the setting storage location. If that is not the case, then we need to create a storage location share. Now, in order to do this, we have to set permissions both on the SMB part of the share and on the NTFS file system. So, the SMB permissions then. We should remove the everyone read permission from the SMB folder share and replace that with a security group that represents the UEV users in our organization and provide the full control permission against the SMB file share. Now, don't worry too much about that because we are going to lock it down on the NTFS permissions. So with NTFS permissions on the folder, we set the creator owner full control on subfolders and files only, and we add our UEV security users group into the folder with the list folder, read data, create folder, and append data permissions. So those are the minimum permissions that are required in order to use the setting storage location. So with those permissions set, when a user initially tries to store their pkgx files in their subfolder, then because that folder doesn't exist, the user has creator owner rights, so there'll be full control in order to create that subfolder and files within it. Okay, and then of course they will get, because they are the creator owner, they'll end up with full control, but otherwise they only have list, read and create folder and append data permissions on the parent folder. Okay, the UEV agent creates and secures the user's folders automatically, so all I need to worry about is that parent folder that we are sharing. You can get more information about configuring this by going to this URL in the Microsoft TechNet library. Okay, so next we're going to look at how to configure the workstation with the UEV agent. We can install the UEV agent from an MSI or an exe file. If we are running the setup from an exe, there are a number of command line switches we can use in order to configure settings such as the settings storage path and the sync provider. The agent itself will install on Windows 7 32-bit or 64-bit, Windows Server 2008 R2 64-bit, or Windows 8 and 8.1 or Server 2012 and 2012 R2. The requirement is .NET Framework 4.0 or higher and PowerShell version 3 or higher. Remember that the UEV agent 2.0 does not require offline file support, so that is no longer checked for. Some examples of deploying the UEV agent. If I'm using the agent setup.exe with the quiet switch, then this will use the default templates and use the Active Directory home directory for the settings storage location. If, however, I want to configure the settings storage location during the installation, then I simply provide the switch settings storage path equals and the path to the location where we want to store the user's PKGX files. In a VDI environment or an RDS environment, or if our desktops are permanently connected to a network, then we can disable the sync method, and this will then remove that 30-minute delay between synchronization. It is also possible to install the agent in a quiescent state so that it's ready when we need to turn it on. To do this, we put enable sync equals false. Now this can be useful if we're including the agent in our gold image and pushing it out to our desktops prior to us implementing the actual features. Then all we need to do to turn it on, we just simply need to run the appropriate PowerShell command to re-enable the agent. Next we're going to look at how to select and create setting location templates. The setting location templates describe where settings are stored. This is the registry locations and file locations that the application uses in order to preserve settings from one run of the application to another. Typically, the application will use the registry, or in some cases it may use a configuration file, or in some cases both. The templates themselves are in XML format, and the files include the application name and a unique ID to identify the template, application process and version identification information, and the location of registry and file-based settings to capture and apply. Now, by having the application name and process and version identifier, then for each different version of the program, we can create a different template file. That can be useful if, as the program matures, more settings are added into the registry or additional files are created. There are a number of inbox templates. These are installed by default along with the agent. They are built and supported by Microsoft. The inbox templates cover the majority of Office 2010 and 2007 applications, various versions of browsers, and some of the Windows accessories such as WordPad, Notepad, and Calculator. There are also some desktop settings captured as well. These include Start menu, taskbar, folder options, regional and language settings, and our Windows backgrounds. Also, any ease of use configuration that we have set are also preserved as well. It is possible for us to create our own custom templates. We have a tool that enables us to do that. The Microsoft User Experience Virtualization Generator is the tool that will monitor an application and then capture the locations where its settings are stored, both in the registry and maybe in the file system as well. Once we've created that template, then we can store that template on an SMB share, very similar to the settings location path, and then that template can be downloaded into our UV agent. And remember, by default that happens every 3:30 in the morning, or when the user starts their workstation thereafter. It is also possible to upload into that location the default templates as well, and this will give us the opportunity then for us to create custom versions of those default templates, and in doing so, through a registry setting or through a group policy, we can disable the use of the inbuilt templates that are stored locally on the workstations. Okay, as I mentioned, the templates themselves are in XML format, and here is an example of an Adobe Reader template. In this particular example, we can see that there is the identity of the actual program itself, so we've got the major version and the minor version being recorded. That way we know which version of Adobe Reader that this particular template is applying to, and underneath that we have some of the registry settings that we are monitoring. Now, in this particular case, the path that we're monitoring is the software Adobe Reader. The path is always HKey current user. We do not replicate HKey local machine settings. It is only those settings that apply to the current user. You'll also notice in this case as well that the path is set to be recursive. So what this means is that we are going to be monitoring all of the registry keys under the Adobe Reader 10 and also under the Common Files Usage Reader 10 paths as well. There is also a folder path being monitored as well. This is under the user's app data, which is the roaming portion of the user's profile. And here again we can see it's the entire path being monitored. So any files that change within that path will be included in the pkgx file. We can manually edit those XML files, okay, but if we do, then it's important that we validate them against the XDS file or the schema for the particular templates. The generator tool itself will do a rudimentary validation, but it will just give us a go, no-go check against the file that we've created. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us any idea where the problem resides within the file. So if you use a tool like XML Notepad, load the XSD file, which can be found at this location, Microsoft Schema's location, okay, or a copy is installed along with the templates. There's a couple of XSD files installed along with the templates on the client machine. So we can just pick those up into XML Notepad, and that will give me a better validation against the actual XML file that we've manually created. So if you're going in there and using an editor and manually making changes, it's very important that the case is maintained in the correct locations, that we put the end tags in the right places, etc. Otherwise the template just won't work. Okay, so when manually creating a template, the template tool will understand certain registry and file locations that we need to exclude. It will do architectural separation for us for x86 and x64, and we'll pick up on the shell process to identify the actual process that's running. File and registry paths based on known folders and registry values are then recorded. Okay, so let's have a look at how we deploy and manage the setting location templates then. In UEV, template management catalogs are a way to centrally store and distribute templates used in our environment. Templates are therefore placed in a common location, and the UEV agent will pull those templates down, as I say, at 3:30 AM by default. We can of course run the scheduled task at any time, or simply run the applied settings template catalog.exe program, okay, to force it to go out and pull down the latest templates. Some considerations when building your catalog. Are we going to be mixing both custom templates as well as inbox templates? Remember, by uploading the inbox templates, it gives us a further opportunity to customize those inbox templates and allow us to configure the applications for our own environment. If we are modifying the inbox templates, then it's important that we do disable the local templates, and as I said earlier, that can be done through a group policy, okay, or a registry key. So I'm going to move on now to demonstrate creating a custom template. Okay, so I'm just going to drop back down into my client 1 machine here in order to do this demonstration. The program I'm going to be using is a very important line of business application here, XML Notepad 2007. When I double click on XML Notepad 2007, you'll notice it takes a few seconds before it actually launches. This is quite normal for this particular program. It does seem to take about 10 seconds or so before it comes up. The options that I can configure for XML Notepad are listed under View Options. And these actual options, rather than being stored in the registry, are actually stored in a configuration file within the current user's profile. May not be the best location to actually store a configuration file, specifically as some of these options appear to be global options, but hey, this is Microsoft for us. I'm going to close that down now, and I'm going to use the actual User Experience Virtualization generator tool to actually generate a template. Now, when I launch this tool, the tool gives us a number of options. On the right hand side here, I've got some links to community links and some links about getting started and planning options from Microsoft TechNet. In the middle here, we've got the 3 primary functions of the tool. That is to create a settings location template, to edit an existing locations template, or to validate an existing location template. Now, the validation option only does a go, no-go check against the file. It doesn't actually tell us where the errors are, but it will tell us if there is a problem within the file. So it's useful to use tools like XML Notepad with the XSD files, the schema file for the templates, to actually do a full validity check. So I'm going to generate a settings location template by clicking on the link here, and that brings us up the template wizard, where I have to path through to the executable for our program. So you'll find that in program files, and then down the bottom we've got XML Notepad 2007. Get into it, and there's XML Notepad.exe, and we'll click open on that. It also gives us the opportunity to provide some command line arguments or working directory. It tells us here that when I click next, the discover location window opens, and then the application will be launched, and then it will discover the locations where the application stores its settings. Now remember, XML Notepad does take a few seconds to launch. The wizard itself will launch it. I don't need to double click on the shortcut, so we'll just wait. There we go, and XML Notepad comes up. Now what the Discovery Wizard is doing is monitoring all the registry keys that have just been read in order to provide us with that window, and all the files that have been accessed in order to provide us with that window. Usually that's enough, but if it's not, then we can actually go into our view options and make some changes to some options just to make sure that they're being picked up and being monitored. Now once we finish with this, we simply close the application down, and then the wizard will then start discovering the settings, and there we're done. Location discovery is complete. Click next to continue. So when I click on the next button, we then get to review the registry keys that is picked up on. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this particular program doesn't use any registry keys to store its configuration in. So in this case, the standard registry keys, where it expects to find such keys, are empty. However, under non-standard, we've picked up 2 registry keys. So it looks like during the launch process, we went to a Microsoft FTP site, and also we went to the software GDI Plus registry keys as well. So they're not normally used, or they're generic keys that are used by a multitude of applications. If I click on Files, we'll notice that again there's no standard files being picked up. These are the file locations that we would expect the application to store its configuration in. But if I go to non-standard, you'll see that there's some files within the user's app data local, okay, that have been picked up on. So desktop, INI, etc. And again, these are non-standard application files. They're generic files used by the operating system and are therefore unlikely to contain configuration settings. Apart from this one here, under users Adam app data local, so this doesn't even roam, there is going to be some files dealing with XML Notepad. So I'm going to want to include those files because that's where my actual configuration file is stored for this particular program. Now we can verify that by going into the user's profile and having a look in that location to see whether or not the configuration file is there. But you would have found this out when going through application discovery, when you discover where application stores its settings, etc. So if I go into XML Notepad here, you'll see there's an XML Notepad.settings file in that location. So I want to include that within my template. So I just tick the box and then click Next. I can then edit the template, so it tells me information about the product version and the file locations that we're monitoring and the registry locations that we're monitoring. And again, if I go to registry, there's no registry keys being monitored, but the file location being monitored are the files, okay, within that particular folder. Now I can be more specific and I can drill down and specify the exact file, but that will require me to do some further editing of the template. So now I click Create and I'm going to save this template. Okay. By default it goes into the same location as the application, but in this case I'm going to save it on my desktop. Okay, and then we close. So now if I open this file up, you can see that we've got the process information at the top here, who created it, who was logged on and created this particular template, the process version information, and then file version, and then down here we've actually got the path that we're actually monitoring. So again, I could modify this and put the exact file name in here that I want to include in case any other files are created within that folder structure. But the chances are, if they are, I do want them to follow me around. Okay, now if I were to make a change to this file and don't do it correctly and save it back again, then we can use the generator tool to actually validate that particular file. So if I do validate file location settings, and there's my template file, click validate, and you can see now there's an error occurred, failed to deserialize the XML. This is likely to due to improper format. That's as much information as it's going to give you. So we would need to use a tool like XML Notepad with the XSD file to be able to further validate that entry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to edit that again, and I'm going to put that correction back in. So I'm going to put the end tag in front of the processes there and save this back. And then I'm going to validate that setting again. And hopefully this time all should be good. There we go. So now I'm in a position to deploy this particular template. Now, one of the ways of doing this is by placing it onto that template share. And we have a template share already configured for us. And that is on our DC1 machine. So setting location templates, and if I copy that template up there, okay, it's now ready to be used within my organization. But of course I've got to tell my clients to actually use that location. And again, I can do that through a PowerShell command. So if I go to do my get-uev configuration, you'll notice that there is a setting for setting template catalog path, which is currently blank. Now, what I can do is I can set the majority, well, I can set all of this configuration and some others through a group policy. So I think it's about time we had a look at the group policy settings. So I'm just going to switch over now to my DC, and I'm going to fire up the group policy editor on this particular machine. I'll just put it into full screen mode so we can see better. Okay, so I'm now switched to the domain controller, and on here we're going to have a look at the group policy settings that are available to us for UEV. So if I bring up the group policy management tool, we'll see that I've already created a group policy called UEV-2, and if I open this up for editing, we'll have a look at some of the settings that are available to us. You'll find them under policies, admin templates, Windows components, and in here you'll find there's a Microsoft User Experience Virtualization. Now that is true for both computer settings and for user settings. So if I go into the admin templates here, Windows components, and again we've got the Microsoft Virtualization Experience. Now, the group policy settings behave differently for UEV than they would for normal group policies. Normally with group policies, if there are settings available for both machine and computer sections, and both the computer and the user are in the same location where this policy is being applied, then the user settings will be overridden by the computer settings. That is not the case with UEV. UEV has been written such that user settings will override computer settings where there is a conflict. Now, if I go to the computer settings here and look at the User Experience Virtualization, you can see I have already configured a number of the settings for UEV. I configured the Contact IT link text. So here's some information for issues with this tool, please call the IT help desk. So this is a bit of information that is available to the client in the company settings tool. And if I go into the URL, again there's a link where we can go to a website to find more information. Do not use the sync provider. This turns off the sync provider, so it's set to none, but at the same time it enables me to set a notification such that if the settings store location is not available to the user, we will display a notification for a period of 10 seconds. The next one I have configured is the roaming window settings. Now I've enabled the ability for the user to roam their desktop, ease of access and themes. This will then effectively remove those settings from the company settings center for that user, so they have no choice over those particular settings. The next setting that we've configured here is the settings storage path, and again I put that to my settings store %username%, and I've also configured on this one the settings template catalog path, which is UEV setting location templates. That's where I stored my template for my XML notepad tool. We've also enabled the User Experience Virtualization. Remember, we can install this in a quiescent state so that we can then enable it in a future date through a group policy or through PowerShell commands. Okay, so those are the settings that I placed in the group policy. We'll also notice under applications we've got a list of all the default application templates. These can be enabled or disabled on a per template basis. If I leave it to not configured, then the user will be able to turn those on or off in the company settings template. You'll also notice we have Windows 8 apps as well, and we list some of the default applications that come with Windows 8 here. Now Windows 8 apps are slightly different when it comes to the settings that roam. We have no choice over those settings. There is no template as such for them. It's just whether we enable it or disable it for that particular application. The settings that roam are basically chosen by the application developer when they write the application. So we have no choice over the settings that follow us around there. Okay, so with that group policy explained if I close the editor window down and then I just link this group policy in, because currently it's unlinked. So I just need to right click here and enable the link. And then if I go back to my client 1 machine and I restart my client 1 machine, while I'm at it, I'll restart my client 3 machine. My client 3 machine has AppV 4.6 and 5.0 installed, and we'll be deploying XML Notepad using those particular tools, and we'll see how the settings will transfer between those components as well. Okay, so now if I go back to client 1 and log client 1 in, and hopefully the template should now be downloaded, because the job to download it runs at computer startup. So if I browse to the program data and look at Microsoft UEV templates, yeah, we've got the XML Notepad template downloaded. So now if I fire up my XML Notepad, remember it takes a few seconds to start up. And we go to View and Options, and if I make a change to the indent level from 5 back to 1 and click OK. Now if I shut this down, now if I go to my DC1, my settings location share on the DC, and go to Add-on and Package Settings, we now see we have a folder for XML Notepad, and in here we have the pkg.x file for XML Notepad. So these settings should now follow me around. Now on client 3, and if I bring that up into full screen, this machine currently has got both the 4.6 SP3 and the 5.0 SP2 AppV client installed, and the AppV client 5.0 is installed in migration mode, and I have the same package deployed currently in 4.6. Now at the moment the UEV agent is not installed on this computer, so if I go into Start, all programs, you'll see there is no UEV tools in here. But I am delivering the XML Notepad, okay, using AppV4.6. So those of you know AppV4.6, the shortcut to the executable is actually sft-tray.exe with a launch to the OSD file for the application. So when I double click on the XML Notepad, then we will see that once it's actually launched, because it takes a few seconds to launch, remember, that I've pre-configured some of the settings when I created this particular application. Now those settings are stored in a user's file, not in the normal file that you'd expect. So if I change that maybe to 9, indent to 9, the font size has been changed to 0.12, and I've disabled auto updates on here as well. So now if I shut this down, the settings for this particular application now are obfuscated. They are not stored in the usual location. Okay, so if I go into the user's profile and we have a look for the settings file for XML Notepad, you'll find that it doesn't actually exist. So if I go to Microsoft, and there's no XML Notepad folder there for that settings file. Instead, AppV obfuscates that file inside another file. And because this is a non-roaming file, then we will find it under Program Data, Microsoft, Application Virtualization Client, SoftGrid Client, AppFS Storage. And then there's a folder for the actual package, which is the XML Notepad package there. And in here, we will have a file, okay, which represents the SID of the user, which is going to be Adams. That's going to be Adam's SID there, called global vol underscore sftfs underscore v1 with a pkg extension. So this is where the settings file will be stored, okay, and the AppV client will then merge it into the user's profile at runtime. Now, because of this, if I'm roaming between a client where the XML Notepad is installed on the operating system rather than being delivered through AppV, then my settings won't follow me around. So what we're going to see here is a quick demonstration of the settings following us around when using UEV. So what I need to do first of all is install the UEV client. So if I go to my lab files and I go to my UEV installers, version 2, x86, and I'm just going to put the agent on this machine. Now this does take a moment or two to install. Okay, so user account control, and again at the end of this installation we have to do a restart of the computer. Okay, so off we go. Now remember, the group policy is being applied to all computers now, so the group policy should be setting our client up for us. So once I've logged this in, and there we go, sync settings are now enabled. So if I bring that up, we should see that the Windows settings are no longer available to me because the group policy has basically blocked that out, but the application settings are available to me. The sync now is gone because we've turned off the sync provider, so we're using the settings directly. We also see we've got XML Notepad in there, so it's downloaded the XML Notepad template for me as well. So now hopefully when I launch XML Notepad, we should see that the settings from the previous run of XML Notepad has now been preserved. And when I go to View Options, we can see that now the indent has gone back to 1, the font size has gone to 10, and the Enable Updates has gone to True. So we've remembered the settings from our launch on Client 1. So now if I set this to 6 and I put the font size up to, let's go a bit larger, shall we, to 18, and click OK, and click OK again. Now when I close this down, if I now switch back to my Client 1 machine, and bring up XML Notepad here, bad choice of application, one that requires a 10-second to start. So now if I go to View and Options, we can see now that's gone to 6 and 0.18. So we are now preserving the settings between a natively installed version of the application and AppV 4.6. So the next thing I'm going to do is convert that package, okay, from 4.6 to 5.0. Now in order to do that, I need a 5.0 sequencer. It just so happens that my Client 1, okay, I have a snapshot with the 5.0 Service Pack 2 sequencer installed. So if I just apply that setting there. Actually, before I do that, I'll just create a snapshot of the where we are currently with it, so I can switch back again. So let me just quickly create a snapshot here. demo. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to revert that to a machine that has our sequencer on it. So which is going to be this one. So if I apply the settings there and click apply. Now the problem I'm going to have is that when I convert a package from 4.6 to 5.0, it doesn't remember the settings. So one of the challenges we've got is how do I preserve the user settings? Now, unfortunately, UEV doesn't help us as much as it could here. One of the problems I've got with UEV is that in order for it to replicate settings up to the settings share, the application has to run on the client. Now the agent only recognizes one change per run. So if I'm deploying the same application multiple times to the same client, so we've deployed it as a locally installed version and an AppV version, then it's basically the last one wins on there. So I'm not going to be changing the settings between the two instances of, if we were using XML Notepad being delivered to the same client. I'm not going to be replicating the changes between the two instances because the agent doesn't recognize the fact that we have multiple instances installed on the machine. So in that case, if I want to replicate settings between 4.6 and 5.0 during a migration process, I need to make sure that my initial launch in 5.0 is done on a different machine. Now we could stand up a VDI machine for that specific purpose, so we get our users to log on to the VDI machine first, okay, and then migrate them back to their own desktops. We'll just log this machine in. Right, so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to bring up PowerShell here. Set the execution policy to be unrestricted and force that change, and then I need to load -module, sorry, import module, not load, import module, import -module, and the module I want to import is the AppV package converter. Okay, with that module now imported, okay, there are two commands that I can basically run from the AppV package converter. So if I do a get -command, -command, and the command I want to get is in the module AppV package converter. You can see the two commandlets that are there. One's test AppV legacy package and the other's convert. So if I do a test -appv legacy package and I path it to //dc1 /content, and if we choose the XML Notepad folder, then the test will run against that particular folder and it tells me that there are no errors or warnings for conversion. So the next thing I need to do then is convert from AppV legacy package minus source path is going to be dc1 /content /XML Notepad, content even, /XML Notepad, and I'll do the minus destination path as being the same location. No, I'll put it into //dc1 /pkg. Put this into full screen. screen, pkglib backslash, and we'll create a folder called XML Notepad, and press return, and that's now going to convert that package for me. So package converted, job done. So if I now go and have a look at that shared folder, so if we go back into my Explorer here, dc1 backslash package lib, I've now got an XML Notepad folder, and in here I've got my @v file. It's important as well that I use the deployment config.xml file, because that has information in about the migration that the client is going to use. Okay, so now that that package has been placed in the package lib directory, I'm just going to quickly switch back to my client 3 machine, and on my client 3 machine, rather than going through the management infrastructure, I'm just going to manually add the package in using PowerShell. So if I go to admin accessories here, PowerShell, and I need to run this as administrator, and put module at the client. So if I do add @v client package minus path backslash dc1 backslash package lib backslash XML Notepad, and in there we've got the @v file. Now I do need to provide the dynamic configuration file for this, because it is doing a takeover of the shortcut from 4.6, and the settings to do that are in the dynamic deployment configuration file. So the dynamic deployment configuration file is also in the same location, package library, XML Notepad, and it's called XML Notepad deployment config.xml. The next thing I need to do is publish that package. So we do that with the publish command. Publish that client package minus name, and the name of the package is the name here, XML Notepad. Okay, with that package now published as an @v5 package, then what should happen now is the shortcut should be taken over, and it should no longer point to the SFT tray utility, but instead points to the integration services for @v version 5, and that's updated the path now. So now when I launch this, it will come up in @v version 5. So again, it takes a few moments to launch. And if I go into View and Options, you will see that it's retained the settings for us from our last run of the application when I moved it to 18 and 6. That is because we've gone through a third machine to do that client 1. If I'd have done this without involving client 1, then the settings that we would have here would be the default settings that were encrypted in the package, which would be an indent of 2 and a font size of 12. So it's demonstrated that we have preserved the settings here. Okay, but in order to do that, I had to launch the application on a different machine to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to the slideshow and back into the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll wrap the session up. Okay, so the next few slides are going to deal with managing UEV in our enterprise. So we've already mentioned the Company Setting Center, and the idea of the Company Setting Center is to give the user a choice as to what operating system and application settings they want them to follow around. However, as we saw through group policies, we can override that decision and force those settings on our users. So group policy is the way to set our clients up. We can fully configure our client through group policy. You can get the template, as I said earlier, by going to tinyurl.com m.-admx2, and that will download the full versions of, or the latest versions of the templates for the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. So that includes the AppV templates, MBAM templates, as well as UEV templates. Settings include that we can set the roaming window settings, as we saw, setting package size warning thresholds. So if the package gets above a certain size, we can warn the user. The synchronization timeout, we saw that. The setting storage path and the catalog path, and whether we enable or not the user virtualization or the user experience virtualization tool. And for each of the inbox applications, we can set whether they roam or not as well. Now remember that if I'm using Windows 8 apps, those are the AppX apps, they can be turned on and turned off, the roaming of the settings, but the settings are defined by the application developer, not by a template. Configuration Manager also has, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, there is a desired configuration management pack for UEV. And what this will do, it will remediate, it will monitor and it will remediate some of the client settings for us, so to make sure that they don't drift from our desired configuration. So the settings that I monitored are, is the agent enabled, is the service running, has template catalog been applied, any max package size been exceeded, if the setting storage path is being configured or the template catalog is being configured, they have to be done through a script for enforcement. So if either of those two have changed from our desired configuration, we have to reinforce those by running a script, whereas the others can be simply reinforced through through the DCM module itself. As I already mentioned, PowerShell can also be used to set the configuration, as well as Windows management and instrumentation. So we can manage our settings, location templates, either through PowerShell commands or WMI commands. Okay, so I mentioned in the demonstration when looking at the group policy settings that the order of precedence is not the standard order of precedence when dealing with group policy. So the processing order is basically from the bottom up. So we do our PowerShell or Windows WMI commands that affect the machine first, and then those can be overridden by those that affect a user. We then apply group policies, and the group policies that are targeted at machines will then be overridden by group policies that are targeted at specific users. So this way, the user settings will always override any machine-based settings that are set. The PowerShell commands themselves, PowerShell is providing what we call a verb-noun syntax, where the verb is on the left-hand side and the noun is on the right-hand side with a hyphen between them. So the verb is like the doing word, the get or set commands, and then what we're doing it to is on the right-hand side. So one of the nouns that we have with User Experience Virtualization is the UEV AppX packages. Now I have a number of verbs that I can run against the UEV AppX packages. I can get, I can enable, I can disable, and I can clear the options there. So remember the AppX packages, these are our Windows 8 packages, so I can get a list of configuration for the AppX packages. We can enable them, we can disable them, and I can clear the current setting so it goes back to default. With UEV configuration, I have the option to get the configuration, so we can see what the current agent is configured for. I can clear it back to its default settings. I can export the configuration, and this is useful if I've got like a test environment and I want to export the settings from there into a live environment. And I've also got the import capability to import the exported settings, and we have the manual set command to set any of the configuration options through PowerShell. UEV template, I have the get, enable, disable, register, unregister, update, and test commands. Now for the template, the get will get me a list of templates that are installed. I can then individually enable or disable templates,
I can register a new template to the client. I can unregister existing templates. And if I have an update on the catalog share, then I can do the update UEV template to get it to go and pull down the latest updates. Whereas the test UEV template commandlet tests the template against the XDS schema file for any errors. UEV template program. If I do a get UEV template program, it will list the programs that are covered by this particular template. So that could include multiple versions of the same program, because we can basically, inside one template, I can embed different version information, have different sets of settings for different versions. So a template can contain settings for one or more programs. UEV template index repair. Now the template itself is, as they come down, we build an index for them. If we feel that that index has become corrupt and we're not picking up templates that we think we should have, then we can do a repair of UEV template index. UEV user settings. These are the settings that UEV has stored when we initially enabled the client. Remember those initial settings that we had. And this is the way we get to restore the initial settings for a user. UEV package. We can export the current content of a UEV package file. They're the PKGX files. We demonstrated that one in an earlier demonstration. So we saw the settings that were stored within the PKGX file. Okay, so that brings us to an end of this presentation on User Experience Virtualization. If you have any questions, then please feel free to email us at techweek@qa.com. But please include my name, Mark Cresswell, and the session name UEV in the subject field. And I'll be happy to return any queries that you have. Thank you very much for listening.